Chapter 2, Light Basics. I'm going to start with the real basic and obvious stuff. Light. Everything we see in the world around us. In fact, even how we perceive the world around us is because of light. Without light, there's no color, no sense of distance, no way to tell what shape something is, or what material it might be made of without touching it. So what is light? From a technical standpoint, light is electromagnetic radiation. If you go and start to study what light is, it can get pretty ethereal and philosophical rather quickly. You know, quantum mechanics and the space-time continuum. So let's just pretend that light is simply rays of energy. Light travels in many ways, but I tend to like to think of light as a bunch of little rays. Light can travel in a variety of directions. Linear parallel rays are the simplest to understand. The most obvious source of linear light in our world is the sun. It's so big and far away that the rays are perceptibly linear to us here on Earth. I'll call lights like this directional lights, since they travel in parallel lines from a single direction. Directional lights also travel the farthest. There are also rays traveling out from a single light source, and with distance, the rays spread out further and further from each other, meaning that the light appears to travel a shorter distance. Light bulb is a good example. I call lights like this point lights, meaning they emit from a single point in space. If you use common 3D animation software, a lot of these terms will be familiar. So light can be emitted in a plethora of ways. There are many surfaces that emit light in very complex directions, like a tube of neon. Once the rays start traveling in too many varied directions, it's called diffuse light, meaning that all the rays are diffused into each other and it's hard to tell which direction the light is traveling from. When we talk about shadows in another little bit, this will make a lot more sense. So, three things happen when light hits a surface. It can either be reflected, absorbed, or refracted. Let's quickly describe each of these events. I'm going to start with the simplest concept, absorption. This is very elemental, but we'll talk about it nonetheless. So, if the light is white, meaning it contains all of the different spectrums of colors, and it bounces off of a white object, it means the light has not been absorbed. All of the light has been reflected. If the object appears red to our eyes, it means that only the red spectrum of the light has been reflected and the blue and the green and all of the other colors of light have been absorbed by the material. So if the object appears black, then all of the light has been absorbed and nothing has been reflected. You already know this, I hope. We'll still cover it, but this is basic color knowledge. So that's absorption. Reflection. It's also quite a simple concept, but in the real world it becomes tremendously complex very quickly. I think this is probably the most important thing I'll talk about on this DVD. If you can understand and observe how light bounces in the real world, it should be a lot easier to create believable imagery, whether it's a 2D painting or lighting a 3D scene. So I'll go into this with more depth about bounced light here in a few minutes, but let me quickly talk about the third occurrence, refraction. So refraction is when light is neither absorbed or reflected, but allowed to pass through materials like glass or water or skin or whatever, and then the light is bent. Again, we'll casually talk about this later in more detail and discuss caustics and diffusion, but basically, it's light being bent is what reflection is, like when you see through a wine glass or something. So we have three main things to observe about light, the way that light interacts with the world around us. Reflection, absorption, and refraction.